Let me give just a little brief background. Steve Pearlstein is well known, certainly here in DC, as the business and economics columnist, you might say, for the Washington Post concerning local, national, and international business topics. I believe he joined the Post in '88 as a business editor, did some defense industry reporting, was an economic correspondent, was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in 2008 for columns anticipating and explaining the global financial crisis. I remember having lunch with you, Steve. I think it was in 2010, but maybe it was in 2008. And I want a share of that because I know we talked about the global financial crisis when we sat down that day, and I remember it well. You've won the Gerald Loeb Lifetime Achievement Award. You've got two great books out, by the way, one called Moral Capitalism, Why Fairness Won't Make Us Poor, and another called Can American Capitalism Survive? They're both good reads. I've sent you all the last couple of columns that Steve has authored on predictions and commenting on the Biden inaugural event. The last thing that I'll say, and then we'll get started, is just that Steve is quite active, or I don't know how to necessarily characterize it, but a strong voice in the no labels group. And I know that a lot of people on this call, but our members in general, support no labels, and he's trying to give them good, solid advice on what can be done and what should be done to positively move things forward. So with that little introduction, sir, why don't you tell us what's going to happen, why it's going to happen, who's up, who's down, and so forth. And we'll make this a discussion-oriented type of thing. But if you just kick off in general, how do you see things? Where do you see things going? What are you optimistic about? Has something surprised you in the opening days of the Biden administration? Just take it from there, and we'll walk you across the wire.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you all for taking some time today to talk. I'm often reluctant to make predictions about, especially about what is essentially political questions. So what would I say? Look, there are hopeful signs that we can move through the polarization and the gridlock. It's certainly not sure. There are a lot of incentives for individual members of Congress and even the president to move back to their corners, to accommodate the more radical people in their own party. But in many ways, I think the closeness of the election has reinforced the argument in both parties. Hey, we're not going to achieve total victory here. It is not achievable for us to do so. So holding our breath and waiting till the next election, preventing anything from happening until we can win everything the next election. If people were to articulate that argument in their caucuses, I think everyone would pretty clear that, hey, that's not going to happen. So what's the next plan? And obviously, then the next plan is to come to some kind of compromise. I would say the attack on the Capitol has been in a perverse way helpful here. People got a pretty good sense of where the game might end if they, and when I say people, I'm talking about members of Congress, if they don't change their behavior, they could see how the game plays out, and nobody liked that. Nobody liked the look of that. So those are the hopeful signs. We obviously have a different president who is serious about governing, and B, is serious about compromise. So we have the basis for some optimism. Here's the pessimism Jeff, and I have to say, I say this having watched your previous conversation with Joe Manchin. These guys, and I refer to them all guys, whether they're male or female, these guys it's been so long since they knew how to govern and practice governing that they actually don't know how to do it. And they're either been at it so little time that they've never seen it done. They really just don't know. Or in the case of the older ones, they have forgotten. They don't know how to play the different game of compromise and negotiation. And it is a game, and you do want to come out at your side as good as you can. They don't know how to play that game. And I see signs of that. I'll give you an example. Joe Manchin didn't want to vote to get rid of the filibuster. Fine. There's an argument to be made for that. If you're Joe Manchin and you're sitting there with the trump cards in your hand, don't be an idiot and tell everybody what you're going to do ahead of time. You say, well, boy, you'd say to everybody, boy, I'd really like to avoid getting rid of that. You know, it really is a thing that forces compromise. I hate to see it. I don't think the Senate will be better off. I would be really reluctant to do that. So, Mitch, what can you tell me about how you're not going to abuse the filibuster going forward so that I can feel good about that? So they're not that good at signaling anymore. They're good at threatening, but they're not that good at signaling. And when you're trying to de-escalate in a game in which you're trying to de-escalate, you want to send a signal that if you de-escalate, I'll de-escalate. And you wait to see whether the other side sends you a signal, and then you respond to the signal, and I do a little, you do a little, and that's how you rebuild trust, and that's how you get to compromise. But they don't know how to play that game. I'll give you another example of this. Nancy Pelosi, after the attack on the Capitol, she quite rightfully said, well, we're going to have to think about impeaching the president. This is outrageous. Fine. What's the first thing she did? She called her caucus together to make a decision. In other words, she called all Democrats together to make a decision. Well, the result of that process was she got 8 or 9 or 7, I can't remember, but some small number of Republicans to vote for impeachment. That was a stupid tactic. She should have had dozens of Republicans on that vote. But when she signaled right away that we're going to decide this in the Democratic caucus and we don't care what Republicans think or do, well, guess what? She forced Republicans to go back to their corner. The first call I would have done would be she already knew which House members voted to certify the elector. And I think there were 70 of them. My first meeting, if I were the Democratic speaker, would have been with those 70 Republicans. What can you do? What do you want to do? What's your instinct? And then I would have had the resolution filed by an equal number of Democrats and Republicans, whatever number that could be, the highest number that could be based on the number of Republicans. That would have been a better way to proceed with that. And a higher number of Democrats on that resolution would have increased the chance that maybe you'd get the 17 Republican senators to vote to convict. But their instinct now is to do everything in their caucuses. And once the caucus decides, then everybody is opportuned, I would say that's putting it lightly, everyone is pressured to stick with the team, no matter whether they agree fully with it or not. And so you ram it through on a purely partisan basis. And when one side says that we're going to do this, the other side says, well, screw you, we'll be just as unified to say no. That's
Steve,
what you need to avoid.
Steve,
I don't know how to avoid that yet.
yeah, Steve, I don't disagree at all with that. And another, just I'd like to hear your reaction to this. You know, there's been a few Republicans who were supporting the president for the last 4 years, who Mick Mulvaney, for example, is one, and others have come out and said, you know, condemned the recent activities and called for his resignation or what have you. And it just seems like the first thing, it's kind of what you're saying, the first reaction from the press or from Democrats. I had a long conversation with a Democratic senator about this the other day, about, you know, I don't understand why you guys don't welcome them and applaud them for their actions instead of, when they act, reminding them of what they did, maybe that you disagreed with the previous 4 years. And it sort of is not inviting. And I think that it's another example of what you're saying about, you want to invite unity, not dissuade.
Well, if you're going to call everybody an enabler, you know, when we defeated Nazi Germany, we went after the top officials of Nazi Germany. We tried to put them in jail. I think we may have even hung a few of them. We didn't call every German an enabler because we wanted, you know, we wanted to move forward. So you need to pick and choose your battles. But I will tell you that, and this applies to too many of my friends, and it applies to my wife, this anger that they want revenge, that they want the other side to admit they were wrong publicly. That instinct is the opposite of what will get us to governance right now. And
sorry, Stephen, are there plausible, if we are in the position to impact people who are our elected officials because we give them money, we have a very broad membership with a lot of people with a lot of different inputs and roles of influence. It does seem to me that there is a history that, in general, that with the Democrats, when people want to enter their tent, they have to do it through the shame door rather than through the welcome door. Are there comments that you would hearken to us to communicate to people to whom we give money and to where we have relationships, which you think resonate? Are there messages which resonate?
I think both carrots and sticks resonate. Carrots are best. We'll have your back. I mean, you can't go to someone like Ted Cruz and say, we'll have your back if you compromise. I mean, forget that. But, and, you know, so it depends on who you're talking about. But if you can say to Republicans and Democrats who are not so far to the left and right that there's a possibility that they're part of the solution, you say to them, we'll have your back in a primary, particularly, that's useful. And, you know, you don't have to be, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. It's not showing up here.
So it's Tony Malkin, Empire State Realty Trust.
Ah, yeah, I know about that. You don't have to say an amount of money or anything. Just say, we'll have your back. You know, the language of politics, or at least the old language of politics, that was enough. We'll have your back. And they need to hear from a lot of different people, in a lot of different individuals. We'll have your back. Now, the other is if the other message is that if you can't be part of the solution, then you're part of the problem, and we won't be able to be with you next time. That's one thing. I will tell you, and I don't know whether this is true of the real estate industry. The real estate industry, I know a bit about. It's a very interesting industry. Obviously, you have connections to both parties. the so-called business lobby in Washington, which is epitomized by the chamber and the Business Roundtable and the small business groups, have lost all their connection to the Democratic Party. They have a much more difficult process now. They have to reintroduce themselves to Democrats, because Democrats basically didn't talk to them, and they didn't talk to Democrats for decades. I don't think you have that problem as much, but they are going to have to do a little groveling. And one way they'll have to do a little groveling is to say to a Democrat, you know, we would really like to move forward with you aggressively on climate, and we would like to move forward with you aggressively on raising the minimum wage. And that can be their opening line to Democrats, and that will be well received. If you were in such a position, what I would do with Democrats is to say, look, the real estate industry has benefited from a huge number of tax breaks over the years. And this was called into great clarification in the case of Donald Trump. And we just want you to know that we want to be part of the solution. You have an aggressive agenda. You're going to need some sources of money. And we understand that if you use that money well, the business community is going to have to put some money in the pot. And we will be at the table to have those conversations with you. If you really want to get their attention, that'll get their attention. In other words, we are not going to fight you tooth and nail on every little tax item. We understand that our industry has done well, and we want to participate in the solution. And that's all you have to say. What you do later is another, but that's an icebreaker.
Hey, Steve, I think that is really strong advice to us. How do you then interpret the Biden $1.9 trillion proposal that seemingly was created? I don't know where it was created, but somewhere over there, and it was just presented as fait accompli to people. How do you stack all of that up, and where do you think it will go? And because what you just said, by the way, is I think what we intend to do. We want to be a positive voice on helping solve all of the problems that are out there. That there's so many of them you can't even list them, and we're not obstinate about it at all. So, but how do you see this 1.9 and the fact that it was just basically thrown out there without any consultation, really?
This is a perennial problem, which is if you're not specific, then you're accused of being vague. And if you are specific, then it sounds like, you've drawn a line in the sand at 1.9 and you're not going to, compromise on it. Joe Biden, when he put out his plan, wanted to put something out specific so he could start a conversation. The Democrats in his party, many of them hear 1.9, and for them, that becomes a line in the sand. And we're not going to give in an inch. And anything less than that is a sign of weakness. So it depends on sort of how you do the 1.9. Obviously, that's a politically derived number. And I think he made a big mistake in throwing in things that were clearly not COVID relief related. We can have an argument about the minimum wage. I'm not sure you folks realize this. The Chamber of Commerce came out in favor of a significant increase in the minimum wage 3 years ago. The Chamber did. The Roundtable has been there for a long time. It's not like that's such a controversial thing, but you could bring that up separately. It's obviously not part of COVID relief, but don't throw things into the package that undermine your message, which is that we are in a dire situation, we need to move quickly, and this is a COVID package. So the 1.9 is obviously going to come down. It doesn't matter what the number is, Jeff, as you know. What matters is what's in it. Do we need to do this for the schools? Do we need to do this for the state and local? Yes or no? I mean, those questions don't answer themselves. There are certain things we need to do about getting the vaccine out. and vaccine production and production of all the things associated with the vaccine and the making of it and the bottling of it and the administering of it. So let's just do that quickly. And then that's a success. It builds trust. And then you move on to the next thing. The mistake was trying to say, we're only going to get one shot on this, so we're going to throw everything on the wagon. That was a mistake.
Another item that you've talked about, I know that you and I share this point of view, is just about the top-down approach to legislating that has taken over this town over the last couple of decades, where leaders will, in their office, decide what the bill is going to be, and then basically give it to committees, committee chairs, and say, this is what we're running with. And I remember the day, I know you remember the day, when there were actually discussions and debates and amendments and things in committees, and the committees would do their will, and then the leadership would weigh in. How do you want to comment on that basic process issue that should be improved, in my opinion?
It is the number one plumbing problem that has to be dealt with, and most people on the outside don't understand that. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that when I say that people even don't know how it should work, they think that everything being decided by Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi is the way it has to be done. It doesn't have to be done that way. In fact, it can't be done that way. The thing about the leaders of both parties in the chamber is that they have much more difficulty compromising, because to compromise is to split their caucuses, and their power derives from caucus unity. So they are actually the least likely people to reach compromise. The most likely people to reach compromise are the individual members who, if you put them in a room together with the guys from the other side, and you said you can't come out till you come up with something you can all live with, they would do it very easily. That's not that hard. None of these things are that hard. And they could do that if they were allowed to do that, but they are not allowed to do it, and they're not even used to doing it. They don't even think they can do it anymore. So, for example, Nancy Pelosi should have taken the 1.9 package, broken it up into its component parts, sent them to the committee, and say, you have 10 days to report back and come up with compromises and come up with things that pass your committee in a bipartisan way. Well, if they had, you would get essentially the no label solution coming out of the normal flow of things.
Hey,
And,
Stephen,
it's not like the leadership can't have any effect on that. Obviously, Jeff, it can. But it's much better to do it that way. And by the way, these members are miserable in their jobs. They'd like to actually be involved in it rather than being told, take it or leave it. And if you're not with us, then we're going to punish you. That's not a very interesting job.
Stephen,
Most of them just spend their time raising money. Yes, Dan Neidick.
yeah, where did getting rid of earmarks fit into all of this? And is there a role for earmarks to make a comeback?
It didn't. It made it difficult for the committee chairman to be able to broker these deals within committees, because it was a currency. I wouldn't overstate. I wouldn't overstate it, but it's a factor. It's a factor. It's one of the factors in reducing the power of the committee chairman. People think, well, you don't want the committee chairman to be all powerful. Well, committee chairman being all powerful is better than the speaker being all powerful. That's one person as opposed to 15 people who are powerful. So, you want to move the power down. So having more powerful committee chairmen and women is the way you want to go. You'd like to even push it below that. But the committees, by the way, are also too big. It used to be that you were really only on one major committee in both the House and the Senate. And so the committees were smaller. So you could actually do something. The committees in the House now are so big that literally you couldn't possibly do anything in those committees. They are obviously just for show. They have these hearings in which, as you've seen them, they go on for an entire day. Nobody actually asks a question. They just give speeches. It's a waste of time. Well, the leadership loves that because it means that that's just the show. There's nothing really going on there. All the power is somewhere else. So now there's a lot of things that need to get fixed. The size of the committee is much more important than the end of earmarks.
Say, Steve, you mentioned the no label solution. Are you suggesting these things to no labels in terms of process changes that they might accept? I mean, a few years ago, Nancy was very successful in, the no pay until you get a budget type of thing and some other process kind of items. Is this something that you're advising them?
Yes, but to be quite frank, the members tend not to have enough backbone to do this. They would need to basically go to the leaders and say, we're just not playing this game anymore. And if you keep trying to play the game this way, we are going to vote against you on all these procedural things that you need our votes for just to run the chamber. We're going to make your life miserable. And they're not at the point where they're willing to do that and to confront the leaders in that way, nor the Senate. It doesn't really, it's not a party thing. They're just not, what they want to do is they want to try to come up with compromises on immigration or on this or on that. They don't want to really fix the plumbing, because to fix the plumbing is to deal directly with taking power away from the leadership. And that involves a confrontation that they don't want to do. They'd rather try to sort of hide behind, well, let's deal with this issue. We can make a compromise here. The problem is that you won't get to if you don't fix the plumbing, then you won't get to the other stuff successfully.
Well, our industry is, as you mentioned, pretty active, pretty politically active, willing to deal with. I mean, we have to get projects approved in every type of city, with different types of governmental control, and are willing to work with everybody. And we're looking forward to doing that. Are there other questions from board members? I mean, I don't know, Owen or Robert or anybody, Rick, somebody that maybe I know has pretty strong views on our policymaking process. Any comments from anybody at this point?
I've got a question, if you don't mind.
John?
Yeah, Steve, thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to hear from you. Just curious what you're thinking regarding the future relationship of Schumer and McConnell. Do you think that they will eventually be able to sort of work together collaboratively in the world, as collaboration possibly can be, or do you think they're going to be at odds? Real serious.
The relationship right now is on a personal level quite poisonous.
Yeah.
As it was with Harry Reid and McConnell. I mean, at the end of it, Harry Reid, I think Harry Reid literally got sick because he was so angry all the time at McConnell. I do not think those two gentlemen are the ones who are going to solve this. But I think if there were some people in their caucus who they respected and who are good and are good tacticians, that those others can say, Mitch, give us a chance here. Let us see if we can work this out. I think that's where the beginning of the solution will come. And as a matter of fact, you remember, I don't know whether there was some little, you would have to be reading tea leaves in a way that you shouldn't waste your time doing, but I do. McConnell, at one point, I think either today or yesterday, said, well, I didn't work this out with Chuck. I went to some of his people, and I had individual conversations with Manchin and some others. And I assured myself based on the kind of courtesy that we have in the Senate, which is, personal promises to each other, that they weren't going to vote for this. So I didn't need Chuck's telling me that we're going to leave the filibuster alone, because I already found that out from members of his caucus. Well, that's a good, healthy thing. They should be talking like that. And but it was a little sort of screw you, Chuck.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a term that we understand. Thank you. Deb, I think.
Yes, thank you for being here. Just a question on the Republican side. Biden is obviously trying to promote unity and compromise and bipartisanship and solving problems. The Republican side really seems could be a schism, literally, in the party. And we see that with Liz Cheney and some of the others. And then we see Portman and Burr and Toomey all resigning and not standing for re-election in 2022. Where do you see that all going? And you see Kevin McCarthy kind of going back and forth on both sides.
So the place to start this is in the Senate, not in the House. And you mentioned the three lame ducks. There's Romney, there's Young, there's Cassidy, there's maybe Cornyn. I have trouble understanding whether Cornyn is part of the solution or part of the problem, because he just runs back and tells McConnell everything that the moderates are doing. But I've given you 7 or 8 names, and honestly, Biden and his staff ought to be marrying these people. Honestly, I mean, if I were president, I'd look down the list of all of those things. What do they want in the world? What national park do they want? What projects do they want? What's their highest priorities? Some of these guys have these very high priorities that you wouldn't even know about it. That they're very interested in autism, or they're very interested in these other things. Whatever it is,
yes,
give it to them. Marry these people. Have them up to the White House constantly, so that and make sure their wives they're all Lisa Murkowski. She's another one. Make sure their wives and husbands are with them, and just marry them. Those are the first people you go to, not the last people you go to, because they will tell you how far give you a sense of how far you can go, what they need. Tell me what you need in order to vote with us. And by the way, just so everyone understands, as soon as you make a deal with those people, you're going to lose Bernie Sanders' vote. You're going to lose Elizabeth Warren's vote. Okay, you have to assume that, and that's okay. That's good.
So Stephen,
because you'll never govern with those people.
Tony Malcolm, just a quick question: if there were actions that you would tell us as people with interest and access to take, would you say, look, focus on the problem solvers, focus on without labels? Are there particular places where you would say, okay, anybody who joins this tent, we will support. If you're not in this tent, we'll think about it. However, at the same time, we're not going to be as focused on you.
Well, in the Senate, I would say you need to be part of the gang. Whatever it doesn't even have a name. It's just literally called the gang. Okay, you need to be part of the gang. In this House, they have 50 members, and there's a bit of a disagreement. I am on one side of that argument. I don't think that the caucus should get any bigger in the House, because the bigger the caucus gets, the more difficult it is to come to consensus. And they try to do everything by consensus, which is pretty hard. But once you get it, it's very strong. But if the no labels group becomes much bigger in the House, then actually getting agreement on anything is going to be hard. The Senate is where you need to start this stuff now. In the House, what the caucus has got to do, the no labels group, is A, come up with solutions or the outlines of solutions. But B, they have to insist that when things come to the floor, they are genuinely debated and can be amended. I don't know. Now, you tell me what you know, and I can explain more. There's a thing called the open rule and a closed rule. And when something comes to the House in a closed rule, it's up or down. You're either with it or against it. And pretty much everything that comes to the House now is now a closed rule. That didn't used to be the case. Open rules allow the House to make compromises. They allow the Democratic leadership to put a bill on the table and then allow moderates from both parties to get a majority and moderate it. So the leadership could say to their constituencies, to the interest groups, we did what you asked, but the House wanted to do something different. So the bill becomes a little more moderate, and then it passes with bipartisan support. Bipartisan support and bipartisan opposition. The left and the right wings vote against it. That's good. But in the House, you need to reform the process more in order to open things up. In the Senate, it's not so much the process, is you've got to, because things work in a more mystical way in the Senate, you just got to get a gang that's big enough. There hasn't been a gang until this year, really. And you need a gang in the Senate of at least, ideally you want 20 members. Whether you can get 10 Republican members, I don't know. Does that answer your question? But you want to encourage the development of a gang in the Senate, and that I can talk to you about specific Democrats or not if you want. Not all Democrats are so great on this either. I got to tell you, they can be pretty partisan. But the core there is Kane, Warner, Manchin. The two senators from New Hampshire, whose names I'm forgetting. The
maybe Sinema, maybe
two senators from Arizona. Those are the ones that come immediately. Dick Durbin, in my opinion, is somebody that could be very helpful here. Whether he's willing to challenge Schumer, I don't know. But part of the problem with this is that the people who do this have to be A, good tacticians, and B, actually know the issues well enough. And unfortunately, there's a lot of members who don't know enough about the issues that they can't really be very good negotiators. And I don't want to go into specifics there, but some of them don't have the wattage that they're going to be effective negotiators.
Steve, talking about return of gangs, I know you're talking about bigger issues and stuff, but I remember a time they used to call that co-sponsoring a bill. What an odd thing to think about. But we've got a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes left. Amy or Kathleen, Shelby, you haven't said anything. Anybody, Jody, Tiffany, people that haven't spoken that would like to say anything here to Steve?
Yeah, Robert, I had a question. What are your thoughts around any reform to the or leeway on the salt tax issue in terms of, it really is draining a lot of people out of the Northeast, California, other places. And do you think that has a shot?
Not in and of itself. If there were a tax bill, and there probably will be a tax bill, and if there were a tax bill that raises the top rate, which there will be, and raises perhaps the capital gains rate and closes loopholes, as part of that, you might be able to get some going back toward where things used to be. I don't think you'll get 100% of the way there.
Hey, Stephen.
Yeah.
Along those lines, do you think what seems extraordinary to me is haven't the Republicans figured out they're going to turn red states purple?
You know, there are some Republicans who worry about that, and there are others who think if we just, we just stick to our guns, we're going to go bring them back to our side. We're just not getting our message across. No, a lot of them don't realize that. Some of them who don't realize that come from states where it ain't going to happen, so they don't worry about it. But what's Rob Portman's? Rob Portman was in a position, and what did he conclude? He concluded I can't win this argument. I'm getting out. So did Toomey. So did Burr. So
You got to believe that what happened in Georgia and Atlanta, or is going to happen in Texas, or you get enough people moving from California and New York. What do you think is going to happen?
They don't seem to be worried about. There's no indication that they're worried about that. I don't know what's going on. Self-delusion is an interesting thing. We're watching that. I don't know how people convince themselves of these sorts of things.
Well, Steve, we've got to probably adjourn. We could talk to you all time, but thank you very, very much. The only thing that you didn't touch on, and maybe a minute if you wanted to, your comment, I thought your article about Biden's inaugural and the language that he used and the welcoming, straightforward empathy and so forth was really a powerful article. Do you want to just mention it or summarize it or comment on it in any way? Everyone's seen it, but there must be some other background to what motivated you there.
Well, vocabulary and tone and rhetoric are really important in changing the dynamics of the politics. And he's shown, he understands this well. He's not, obviously verbally, he's not all that facile, but in his own way, he understands this, and he has really refused to engage in the kind of language that is now common in politics. And the contrast, when you hear him talk versus some of these others, works to his benefit. And just saying, let's just tone it down. People that has wide appeal, and so he's doing a lot of things right. Naturally, but I think he's got staff that understand this as well, and so far they've been pretty pitch perfect. The big mistake was throwing too much in that 1.9 package, but that's not a rhetorical thing.
Well, thank you, Steve, and that I think we all agree with the tone and the language. And the other thing that I think we all agree with was one of your predictions from the December 31st article that noted that the coming collapse of the real estate industry was overstated and mythical. And thank you for that. That's always good. So,
let's see how it goes. But I've been pleasantly surprised.
Well, thank you for your time.